The Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez, born February 29, 1960, El Paso, Texas, U.S., died June 7, 2013, Green Bay, California, was an American serial killer, rapist, and burglar who murdered at least 13 people in California in 1984 to 85. He was convicted and sentenced to death, but died while in prison. Ramirez grew up in El Paso, Texas, the youngest of 5 children born to Mexican immigrants. According to reports, when he was 12 years old, a cousin who was a Vietnam War veteran showed him pictures of Vietnamese women he had allegedly raped, tortured, and killed. The following year, Ramirez was a witness to his cousin's fatal shooting of his wife. Around this time, Ramirez began breaking into homes. After dropping out of high school, he moved to Los Angeles. He continued to commit crimes and was briefly imprisoned for stealing a car. Famous serial killers. In June 1984, Ramirez committed his first known murder, raping and stabbing a 79-year-old widow. In 2009, he was implicated in the April 1984 murder of a 9-year-old girl after his DNA was determined to be at the crime scene. However, Ramirez was not charged with the crime. He then apparently waited some 8 months before resuming his killings. Most of the deaths occurred in the Los Angeles area and took place during home invasions. Ramirez's victims, some of whom survived, were often sexually assaulted and beaten, and satanic symbols were found at many of the crime scenes. The Night Stalker, as the killer became known, created a panic that saw a surge in gun sales. Eventually, a fingerprint was discovered that led to Ramirez's identification. On August 30th, 1985, 6 days after his last known murder, Ramirez's name and photograph were released to the public. And the following day, a man in East Los Angeles saw him and notified police. A chase ensued, and as Ramirez tried to steal a car, he was surrounded by a crowd and beaten until police arrived. A self-described Satanist, Ramirez made various references to Satan during his legal proceedings. He notably drew a pentagram on his palm. His trial began in early 1989, and in September he was convicted of 13 murders and a variety of other crimes. Nearly 2 months later, he was sentenced to death, with the judge stating that his crimes showed cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. Ramirez never expressed remorse, and after receiving his sentence, he stated, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory." He was believed to have committed other murders and rapes, but was never charged for any additional crimes. While on death row at San Quentin State Prison, Ramirez was diagnosed with cancer. He died in 2013. There has been considerable debate among criminologists about the proper definition of serial murder. The term serial murder was popularized in the 1970s by Robert Ressler, an investigator with the Behavioral Science Unit of the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. The FBI originally defined serial murder as involving at least 4 events that take place at different locations and are separated by a cooling-off period. In most definitions now, however, the number of events has been reduced, and even the FBI lowered the number of events to 3 in the 1990s. The FBI's definition has been faulted because it excludes individuals who commit 2 murders and are arrested before they can commit more, and individuals who commit most of their murders in a single location. Such criticisms have led many scholars worldwide to adopt the definition put forward by the National Institute of Justice, an agency of the U.S. Department of Justice, according to which serial murder involves at least 2 different murders that occur over a period of time ranging from hours to years. Criminologists have distinguished between classic serial murder, which usually involves stalking and is often sexually motivated, and spree serial murder, which is usually motivated by thrill-seeking. Although some serial murders have been committed for profit, most lack an obvious rational motive, a fact that distinguishes them from political assassinations and terrorism and from professional murders committed by gangsters. Serial murderers are assumed to kill for motives such as sexual compulsion or even recreation. In many cases, the killings are thought to give murderers a feeling of power, which may or may not be sexual in nature, over their victims. Typical victims have included women, migrants, prostitutes, children, homosexuals, and vagrants. Serial murderers have attracted immense attention in popular culture, partly because they are perceived as personifications of evil. Serial murder has occurred throughout history. One of the earliest documented cases involved Locusta, a Roman woman hired by Agrippina the Younger, the mother of Nero, to poison several members of the imperial family. Locusta was executed in 69 CE. Serial murders also were documented in medieval England, Germany, Hungary, and Italy. The French Baron Gilles de Rais, who is the likely model of the character Bluebeard, was executed in the 15th century for the murder of more than 100 children, though it is open to question whether the charges against him were true. Although it is likely that serial murder in Asia and other parts of the world has a similarly long history, documentary evidence of early examples is scarce and controversial. The known incidence of serial murder increased dramatically in the early 19th century, particularly in Europe, though this development has been attributed to advances in law enforcement techniques and increased news coverage, rather than to an actual rise in the number of occurrences. Serial murderers of the early 19th century included a German woman who poisoned more than a dozen people, the Irish-born William Burke and William Hare, who killed at least 15 people in Scotland in the 1820s, and an Austrian woman who reportedly fed children to her family. The most famous case of serial murder in the 19th century was that of Jack the Ripper, who killed at least 5 women in London in 1888. Shortly afterward, the United States recorded the comparably dramatic case of Herman Webster Mudgett, H.H. Holmes, who confessed to 27 murders and was executed in Philadelphia in 1896. In the 20th century, cases of serial murder received widespread coverage in the news media. Some murderers became known by lurid nicknames, such as the Boston Strangler, the Dusseldorf Vampire, Peter Curtin, the Monster of Florence, and the Killer Clown, John Wayne Gacy. Their crimes, which both horrified and fascinated the public, raised numerous social and legal issues, such as the tendency of police to be less thorough in murder investigations when the victims were poor or of low social status. Other notorious serial murderers included Harold Shipman, a British physician who killed at least 215 people from 1975 to 1998, Andrei Chikatilo, who killed at least 50 people, mostly teenagers, in the Soviet Union from 1978 to 1998-1990, Javed Iqbal, who murdered 100 boys in Pakistan in 1998 to 99, and Muhammad Adam Umar, who confessed in 2000 to having killed 16 female medical students in 187 Yemen and 11 other women in Sudan. In the United States, Ted Bundy killed more than 25 girls and young women between 1974 and 1978, and Jeffrey Dahmer murdered 17 boys and young men, most of them in the late 1980s.